I've spent over 200 nights over the last 10 plus years in 7 different mental health hospitals. One minute I'm a high performing rowing athlete, a club promoter, trying to make money, trying to do business, trying to study, have friends. The next minute I'm locked up in a mental health hospital. People come and go, companies come and go, customers come and go.
Yeah.
I think over time you just learn that change is inevitable. You don't get what you want immediately, but there'll be something else.
All right. Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the Cosmic Bridge podcast. I'm with my friend James Ski. Welcome to the show. Good to see you in person.
Thanks for having me. It's been a while, but I'm extremely excited about this conversation.
Yeah, it's going to be a good one. So yeah, just to start, you're the founder and CEO of Sales Confidence.
That's right.
I know a lot about it. Kind of community of sales professionals. How would you describe Sales Confidence?
Yeah, so at its heart, Sales Confidence is a learning and development membership for salespeople and sales leaders. And we built our reputation on building the largest network and events business for salespeople and sales leaders in the UK. So really, ultimately what we do is we help salespeople and sales leaders at each stage of their career with their mindset, well-being and performance. And we cultivate connections via events and online networking and providing them the tools that they can kind of learn and up-level themselves to get to the next stage.
Okay. I like your 3 pillars of mindset, well-being and performance. Perhaps we'll come back to those later. Before the show, you were just showing me your new book, which you're going to be releasing, the cover of it.
Yeah.
And something I didn't know that I saw in there was your first job was doing door-to-door milk sales.
Yeah.
Maybe you can run us through that. Yeah.
Fair. So, I look, personally, I knew I always wanted to be in sales. The story to that was I used to fancy a girl in my town. Her dad was a successful businessman, and he basically had all these kind of get wealthy books, and I read them, and most of the books that had very successful entrepreneurs or CEOs or investors, the people that were in those roles had a background in sales. So I was always seeking out sales roles. When I was at uni, I found this particular role, which was knocking on doors in the suburbs outside of London, persuading people to get their milk delivered. And it was a commission-only job. Now, let's bear in mind, this was probably, oh my gosh, it's almost 20 years ago now. But ultimately, you can imagine even 20 years ago, most people got their milk from Tesco's, Sainsbury's, Ocado, whatever. You didn't really need the milkman. The milkman was a kind of dying trade, as it were. But we literally used to knock on people's doors. Usually it was like stay-at-home mums or people that were working from home. We'd start at like 3 o'clock and go to like 9 p.m. And your job was commission only to persuade people to get their milk delivered by the milkman and not pick it up in their weekly shop via the supermarket.
Wow. I imagine that job would have put a lot of people off sales, so I'm surprised you kept going. How was that job? How did you enjoy it?
Well, a couple of things. It was usually during the summer. You're in shorts and a polo top. And it was brutal in terms of the amount of no's, but Greg, our the owner, would teach us that, for every no you get closer to a yes. And I still live by that rule today. Sure. And I'm sure we all do in sales. And it just taught you to have grit and resilience. And then when you got that win, you got excited, you were grateful to the person that made that commitment to you. And you got very good at building that muscle in your mind of how to instantly get someone excited about what you do, warm them up, get the buyer in a position that you can influence and persuade them. So I loved it. And it gave me a really good grounding in what it takes to be successful in sales.
Wow. So you mentioned the words grit and resilience there. We've had lots of different people on this podcast, so some have not been sales leaders, but the sales leaders that we've had on like yourself, what I found is a lot of them have a story of a dark night of the soul where they found that grit and resilience. And I know with yourself, you've had some issues with mental health, and you mentioned this ended up at 20, you go into facilities. So I was wondering if you could kind of run us through the story.
Sure. And look, that's part of the reason why I think I've been attracted to the content that you've been putting out. I think you're getting to the heart of people's stories. I think I could come on here and have a conversation, and from a shop front perspective, maybe people consider my network size, the brand that I've built, to be hugely impressive and valuable, and I'd like to think so too. But the truth is, behind that, there's a kind of quite a difficult journey with my mental health, which is based around my diagnosis of bipolar disorder. So the kind of highlights to that are I've spent over 200 nights over the last 10 plus years in 7 different mental health hospitals. I've been sectioned under the Mental Health Act. I've escaped a mental health hospital, which sounds dramatic, and if you ask, I can tell you the story. But ultimately, I've had to deal with the high highs and the low lows of an extreme mood and mindset. This is not alcohol or drugs induced. That's just not my bag. But as a result of kind of, I would say, a combination of ambition, fragility in the brain, a predetermined, possibly hereditary through family. I have this susceptibility to ill health that can happen at various periods in the year. I'd argue like 90% I'm like anyone else. Like, you have high highs, you have low lows, but because of my diagnosis, because of the fact that I've been in a mental health hospital, I take medication. Clearly, I have this illness. That's definitely a fact, and I've had to manage it. And I've been able to raise 3 children, build a business. But yeah, it's caused me some dark difficulties at times.
So can you run us through, I think beforehand we were speaking, you said the first time you went into somewhere was when you were 20. Could you talk us through the first time this all kicked off?
So it's an interesting story. So I think at high school, or sixth form in the UK, I was a high performance rowing athlete. I went to a top school in the country called the Windsor Boys School, and I was very fortunate to have excellent teachers, excellent support. My parents had separated. I definitely think that played a part in maybe some of the challenges I faced, but I didn't realize I had a lot of support at school. I was a very obsessive character, and I definitely struggled with things outside of the pursuit of being a world-class rowing athlete. Essentially, I was obsessed by it. And, I had this one particular teacher who was like very supportive, would counsel me on a weekly basis. I would go into these kind of dark moods, but I didn't really have a reason to consider it was anything more than just challenges at school and trying to build my rowing career. But when I got to university, that's when things really changed. And I immediately wanted to pursue business. So I had kind of, I think, 4 things I was interested in at uni. 1 was rowing. That was the main reason I went to Oxford Brookes. 2 was setting up a company. I was just ready to do it. 3 was making some money, and then 4 was girls, and then maybe 5th was study, and I didn't really get around to much of that. So I had this run of business projects that just floundered. And I think I built, I don't think I had the best reputation at uni for a while. And anyway, eventually I thought, well, everyone's making money running club nights, so maybe I'll do a club night. We did the first night, which was on a Sunday before the Monday, and the Sunday before Freshers Week. So there wasn't really a night, so everyone was up for it. This night sold out. It was a mega success, made some great money. And then the Monday, I had this guest list of about 1,000 people, and I was like, well, I'm quids in here. This is going to be phenomenal. And anyway, it was the Monday of everybody else doing their Monday night. So of course, what you do as a student, you put it on your list, you put it on her list, you're on everyone's list, right? You say you're going to every night because you don't want to miss out. And basically like 100 people trickled into my night, and it was like a 500 capacity club. The owner was very upset, and I was like, well, I need to do something. I need to act quick. So what did I do? I got in my Vauxhall Corsa. I drove down the main nightclub strip. I did a 360-degree turn in my car. I got on top of my car and took my clothes off, bar my shorts. And that was the reaction from thousands of students in the street. I'm on top of the car. Some bugger stole my keys. So I was stuck on top of the car with not much on. Eventually, the police pulled me over and was like, look, what the hell's going on? You've caused a major incident in the centre of Oxford on a big, busy night. I said, look, I don't know. I just needed to get people to my nightclub. And they said, well, you need to go home and sort yourself out. So I did more than that. I went and saw a doctor. I just knew something wasn't right. In fact, it was a counsellor. And she was like, you're experiencing... some challenges and clearly upset. I went and saw my rowing coach, got very upset in front of him. And then I went back to my hometown in Windsor, and my mum was on holiday. My dad lives up north, so my best mate's mum took me under her wing, bless her, and she was like, "Do you need some help?" I said, "Yeah, I need some help. I need to go and see someone." And she took me to the GP, and the GP just looked me up and down and was like, "You need to go to the hospital." So I went to A&E, got to A&E, met a doctor, then met a psychiatrist, and they were like, "Listen, we don't think you're very well, and we think you need to go to hospital." And I laughed because I was like, "I am in hospital. Like, why do I need to go to another hospital? Like, I'm fine." And she's like, "No, you need to go to a mental health hospital." And I was like, "Oh my God." I didn't know what that was back then. I didn't know anyone that had been in a hospital like that. And so my best mate's mum takes me to this hospital, and then that's when I enter the system. At 20 years old, 1 minute I'm a high-performing rowing athlete, a club promoter, trying to make money, trying to do business, trying to study, have friends. The next minute I'm locked up in a mental health hospital. And that changed my life, changed everything, set me on a path that, has given me the most insightful, kind of wonderful experience, but also the scariest, frightening moments of my life. Very rarely do I talk about that, but that's been very much part of a journey that has continued. Fortunately, touch wood, I haven't been in hospital for 4 years, and may that remain, because it's not helpful for me and my family. It's not productive. It's not a great experience, even though I make the most of it. That's kind of the story how it first kicked off.
Wow. So you mentioned it can be an insightful experience, and I think when we were talking before, you mentioned you actually have these amazing conversations where you connect with people deeply. Was that from the very first experience when you were 20?
It was, yeah. I mean, so you can imagine, well, if you can try to imagine that, the reason people get to that extreme, that they're in a mental health hospital and they're, locked up behind the lock and key, is that people are either at risk to themselves, self-harm, or some other form of abuse, or they could harm other people. And there's all sorts of stereotypes attached with mental ill health. Part of the reason why I'm happy to talk about it is because I want to destigmatize the fact that you can be anyone and get ill with mental ill health. And also, actually, arguably, I've had pretty good career. I'm a high earner, I've got a good business at times, and it happened to me. So I want to destigmatize it. But yeah, I mean, if I think back, I haven't thought about it for a while, so it's quite interesting you ask. Like, the hospital was in Ascot, Heatherwood. They knocked it down, sadly. I just saw, because they've got multi-million pound properties they want to build over it. But it was back then it was a shared ward, so it means women and male were on the same ward. That's quite unusual these days, if at all, I think. And people were just telling you their life stories, how they ended up there, and it's very sobering. People that are lost, that have massive issues, are all together on a ward where you have tens and tens of nurses, doctors, trying to figure out what's potentially wrong with you, or why you're not right, or for me, why was I suddenly acting in the way I was acting when it seemed relatively normal. And you have very, very deep conversations with people about their lives, and I honestly, I've got some amazing friends, and I've had some interesting partners, and I've had very deep conversations, but nothing compares to when you're in hospital. These conversations are so raw and so honest, because some people are literally in there because they've just taken their life. So they've got nothing else. They're just like, it's over. And so they don't mind telling you what they've been through. And when you hear that, it's, it makes you grateful for what you've got. I think, my image sometimes, I mean, even now, like, I'm wearing a Hugo Boss top, I'm wearing Levi jeans, my image sometimes is one of like, super outgoing, maybe over the top, maybe not just confident, maybe a bit arrogant. But really, actually, I'm very humble. I have a huge amount of humility, and I have massive empathy for people generally, but particularly people that have been and suffered in a way that, has caused them difficulty and upset, because I've seen it firsthand and I've experienced it myself, how painful it is for some people out there. And, when you go into a hospital, they're peaceful. They can be peaceful at the right hospital, and they're there to kind of look after you and help you recover. And when you start to go through that recovery and you come out the other side, you look back and think, wow, like, I'm so fortunate I had people that were willing to support me. So, if someone was listening to this and they've got a friend or a family member that's ended up in hospital, or they're in the hospital right now, while it's difficult, it's probably the best place for them.
Yeah. So what's the process that happens when you go into a facility? Like, obviously we talked about the other patients where you're kind of learning from them, but in terms of like the professionals that are helping you, what are they helping you with?
Yeah, that's a good question. So, you usually will get admitted. You might get admitted under the Mental Health Act, which means you're not there voluntary. Voluntary means in theory you can check yourself out.
Yeah.
If you're under the Mental Health Act, you're committed to the hospital, and you can only come out when the doctors or a group of doctors have assessed that you're well.
Yeah.
And it's in the best interest for you to leave. So, you have various levels of staff. You basically are allocated a psychiatrist and a psychologist and a doctor that are assessing your mental and physical well-being. So you're having blood tests, you're having tests, and you're being assessed on a daily basis. You're being monitored 24/7. So the nurses and the nursing assistants are watching you 24/7. Now, they're often watching you because you could be, harming yourself, and you could be also potentially harming other people. Fortunately, that's not me. I haven't thought about suicide ideation, they call it, but I'm not a self-harmer, and I've not harmed anybody else. But that is what you're in a melting pot of people. So you're being watched, you're being assessed. It's very secure. It's very safe. They should be. And you're just going through a process daily, then weekly, to review how you're making progress. You're being subscribed medication. They're assessing the impact of that medication. If you're lucky, which I would say, and you're in a place that has a gym, you're doing daily exercise. Wow. Oh yeah, some of these places. I mean, I've been in hospitals where they got a gym, they got an art room, they got a clay room, they got a what do they call it, a sensory room. They're legit. Like they're there for you to rest and recover. Yeah. Now, I would choose a hotel over going to one, but I've had quite good experiences in some of these places. So yeah.
You mentioned an art room there, which I thought was interesting, because I asked you the question when we were chatting before the podcast as well around, you hear about this, I think it was either Mozart or Beethoven that had a breakdown, and all these like creatives, whether they're musicians or artists, and they have like mental health problems, and almost it gives them creativity in a way. So do you also think this kind of alternative side of your brain that's obviously been detrimental in some ways, it's been helpful in other ways?
Yeah, there's definitely, I have, there's a book in the US called The Hypermanic Edge, and my bipolar is about hypermania before you go into mania, which is a more severe version of being manic, as they call it. And so, that's why it's called manic depressive originally. I think they rebranded it just to soften it, to bipolar. But without a doubt, like, the things that I've been able to do in my career, the pace that I can move at, the way I can rapidly think, the number of plates I can juggle, my ability as an athlete to kind of reach peak performance. I was pretty close to representing Great Britain. I never made it, but many of my friends were Olympians. Like, there is a high performer in me. There is an edge that I have over many people, my competitors. But it also makes me super fragile. That's the odd thing. I'm a 6'4" guy, look like I can handle myself. I can. But like, there is also a side to me that means that if I hit a certain area of stress in my brain, it all can fall to pieces very quickly. Yeah. And my daily job while it can be considered beneficial, is to not reach that line where I cross over and I require additional help.
So it was while you're at university at this first experience, and then did you go back to university afterwards?
Yeah, well, so I took a year out, which wasn't fun. I was kind of like lost for a year, and then I did go back, completed my final year, and managed to get a decent degree, based on the uni, and then went into work.
And then you went straight into sales, or?
Yeah. So my first sales role was like an SDR type role for a telecoms company, and it required me to cold call literally the yellow pages. It was that old school. There was a list of numbers around the country, and I used to cold call. It was a mixture of SDR work and field sales. So you'd call telecoms business owners in like the Bristol area, and then you drive down the next day and meet them. So it was quite fun, to be fair. Sales manager was a former mechanic, Tim, if he's listening, and he was a bit wide boy, the whole setup. But it was quite a good grounding to start my career.
Nice. And then I was thinking as well, because obviously you said you have to protect yourself so you don't get to this certain level of stress, right, for your mental health. But sales is one of the most stressful jobs.
Well, this is a problem. To be honest, everyone, doctors included, advised me against going into sales. Yeah. But I was set on it. And most said, don't bother with business. Like, I'm stubborn. I haven't helped myself, I'll be honest. If I just stuck to a fixed salary 9 to 5, I probably would have been a lot healthier, a lot saner. But that is just not me. That's not my character. I'm a striver. I want more for my life, my family. I want to achieve big things in business, and I had children very young. I had children in my 20s. Combine that with, having an entrepreneurial ambition, combine that with having a high pressure sales role, plus the bipolar, it has been a lot. And I think, again, I try and practice gratitude a lot more than I used to. And I think if I acknowledge myself and just be grateful, I feel grateful that I've had these experiences, but I've also learned to manage them. And I think that just comes through, maturity and being open and honest. I wish there was someone like me when I was 20 that I could have spoken to, and they would have gone, what I would say to people if they're listening, to say, look, might be tough now, but you will get through it, and it will work out. Yeah.
So you said overall you spent 200 days in like different mental health wards. So imagine in your 20s as well, there was other instances where you're going back in, or?
Yeah. In my 20s, I had there's a period of consecutive, every 2 to 3 years, I went back into hospital for a period of time. Some might have been 60 days, some might have been 30, some might have been 20. And so I'd visit these hospitals. And because my dad lives in the north of England, my mum lives in Windsor, I live in Essex. Depending on where I'd land, I would end up in a different hospital. So that's quite unusual, pretty unique, to be honest, that I've seen so many different hospitals. Some are much better than others. Some are horrendous. If anyone's interested, the nice ones are in the north of England.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. Geordie nurses, fantastic, very lovely. And just higher spec hospital, higher standard. And I got very lucky, again, because my dad lives up there. And then hospitals in East London, not so good, not so pleasant.
Funny, we're filming this in East London now.
Yeah, sorry. Hospitals in central London, or just I've stayed in a private hospital in Roehampton, very good. So it's a complete mixed pot, but it's like anywhere in life, postcode lottery, they say in the NHS, and that's the same with a mental health hospital. And I think that's what scares people. There are horror stories out there, and I understand that, but I would also say that generally these people that work in hospitals where it's low paid, and it's a vocation, they genuinely care, they do. And I've honestly, the heart of golds, the people that I've met in these hospitals that are so just willing to help you and are so kind, it's amazing. And I'm just grateful, and I'm so grateful for how they got me through some of these experiences, because you're there alone. No one really visits you in a mental hospital. That's the sad thing. It's like if you're in a normal hospital, everyone brings flowers, checks you out. You know, you've got a broken leg, you might even have a very serious illness. No one wants to come and visit you in a mental health hospital. So it's very lonely, you know, and you learn quickly who your real, true core mates are. And I'm lucky I've got a very core group of people that will get my back, look out for me, check in on me, and, you know, it'll be all fine.
And is that because they don't want outside people coming in, or?
No, I just think it's an odd thing, you know. If I said to you, do you want to come and hang out with me at a mental health hospital, what do you think? You're like, I'm not sure. Do you know what I mean? It's not, it's just you're allowed to have people visit you. It's just not particularly common. You know, so and that's where you end up building relationships, not always good to do, because you're in a place where, you know, there's a lot of people that are unwell, as I said, but that's kind of how it goes.
So it sounds like in general, though, those experiences helped you with your mental health, because I know a lot of people say, oh, the mental health institutions are broken and I've gone in and it hasn't helped me. But it sounds like you said there were some bad ones you went to, but overall it's been productive for you. Without
a doubt. Like, they've been very effective in those crises to support me and help me. Yeah, I'm not big on, you know, I'm not one to bash. Yes, I've told you there's some better than worse. Of course, there's people that are better than worse. You know, there's nice people, there's not so nice people in any profession at all levels, from the cleaner to the CEO to the investor to the beyond. So you can't, you know, tarnish everyone with a bad brush. I've had some amazing experiences overall, and I'm super grateful for everyone that's supported me.
Yeah, I was just doing some calculations in my head, because you said it was 4 years ago you had the last incident happened. Was that just as a pandemic kicked off? Or?
It was. Yeah, good math. Yeah, so literally we did a huge company kickoff at a hotel in Richmond. My psychologist was there, actually, and it was a melting pot of stress. COVID was in the news, but we didn't really know it was. We knew it was kind of coming to England, or wherever we thought it was. You know, something was happening. And I got ill, this sounds extreme, but I don't mind sharing, whatever. Like, I got, the police were called because I was not acting calmly. And they put me in the back of a van, took me to a holding cell, and then I got put into a hospital. And then COVID hit. And I always joke, because I'm like, I would say to my mates, I was like, well, now you're locked up. And that's what I'm used to, you know, having. But I found it bizarre. Like, I was like, I couldn't work it out, because they then shut down the hospital. You couldn't move. You weren't allowed out again. Wow. Generally, you are allowed to step out, and I couldn't do that because COVID put in some very strict, obviously, procedures. And then, unfortunately, at the time, the business I had at the time required me to let the majority of people go, because it was an events-based business. Yeah. So yeah, it was a combination of, you know, tough experience being someone that was going through an episode of mental ill health combined with COVID, and then the impact on my business. Yeah, that 2020 wasn't a particularly fun year for me.
Yeah, it wasn't a fun year for many, but it sounds like especially for you. But it's interesting because that actually happened before the pandemic. So you had that, and then you had the pandemic.
This is it. It was like, honestly, the cascade of how these things played out. It was mad.
Wow. So going back to sales confidence, one of your pillars is mindset, right? Yeah. And I think one of the reasons I started this podcast is obviously I have a big network of salespeople like yourself, and mindset is so important in sales and entrepreneurship in general. To say now, as a business owner, right, or even an account manager who's listening to this, you always get that dreaded news. Your dream customer, they churn and they're not going to renew. How do you deal with those situations, and has any of your experiences in like mental health would help with that?
I think these days now, you can't be attached to the deal, any customer, any prospect, to be honest, anyone. You know, I think they talk a lot about that in Buddhism, you know, not to be overly attached.
Yeah.
And I think I'm definitely like that now. I'm at peace with people not continuing, you know, customers leaving. And so I think you've got to have a growth mindset that you're going to find the next customer. It's around the corner, even when you don't know it. You've got to have that belief, that optimism. and that you've got to reaffirm that with affirmations that I will find my next customer soon. And so therefore, when you lose that customer, it shouldn't be an issue. Now, obviously, it helps if you've got a bigger pipeline.
Yeah.
If you're relying on that one deal to hit your quarter, hit your year, you're playing an uphill battle. But yeah, I think it's not to be so attached to the outcome or the deal or the customer.
Yeah. And is that something you kind of learn through sales or more through the mental health stuff, or a bit of both?
Probably a bit of both. You know, people come and go, companies come and go, customers come and go.
Yeah.
I think over time you just learn that change is inevitable. You don't get what you want immediately, but there'll be something else.
Yes, 100%. Yeah, and I feel like the better I always say this is like sales teaches you about communication. Or sales at a raw level, it's like how do you communicate and build relationships with other people? Even if you're selling to a tech company, there's humans within there. Or, you know, most of what we do is we sell to businesses, not people, but within the businesses there are people, right? And is actually all the things that sales teaches you about active listening and, you know, not being afraid of rejection, because that's, even if you're the best salesperson in the world, you're going to not win most of your deals, right? So I feel like the lessons you learn in sales, kind of like you were saying, they teach you a lot about life as well.
I agree. I think, you know, salespeople have a huge competitive advantage over the non-salesperson because we understand human dynamics, emotional intelligence, how to influence, persuade people. Every day you're being influenced by something, someone, an advert, a TikTok video now, a YouTube, you know, a friend, a colleague, a boss, a manager. That's the game that the salespeople are in. And like, for me, that is what's so cool about it. Like, it's such a skill, such an advantage. And you can apply it in so many areas of your life. And, you know, I've been doing sales confidence for 6 years now. It's my 6-year anniversary 2 weeks ago. I was shocked. And it's, you know, been fun. It's been a tough journey at times. It's been a roller coaster. But the ability to communicate and create connections and network is so valuable. It's so valuable. And when I think about what's next or what I'm going to be building on and what I might want to do, what's going to get me there? More people.
Yeah.
And my ability to influence, persuade, suggest is all down to a sales skill and communication, as you said.
Yeah. And you mentioned earlier as well, when you had your event just before the pandemic, you have a psychologist as well?
Yeah, I do, yeah.
Yeah. Has that learning, is it a woman or a man?
It's a woman.
A woman, yeah. I guess through the sessions you have with her as well, has that, because I'll give you, reason I'm asking this question is a lot of what we do at Growth Genie, the first module we do is all about the psychology of sales and how you're going to feel fear, you're going to feel anxiety, you're going to feel anger, and then you just have to accept these things and have like antidotes to deal with them. So I got very deep into the psychology of sales because you're dealing with humans and humans have psychology and emotions, right? So do you feel like through this process of having a psychologist as well, that's helped you, you know, with your business?
I mean, if someone interrogated her about me, you'd find out everything. She knows everything, literally everything about me. So I've been able to, you know, share my deepest, darkest secrets, my challenges, my hopes, my dreams, everything in between. I've actually worked with her for, almost 8 years.
Wow.
She's changed my life. I couldn't operate in the way I do without having someone like that. Everyone should have a psychologist or a therapist in their world because there's no judgment. Once they know you, they support you. And, you know, it means that you're not alone navigating life. And that's something that I think a lot of people experience, even if you're in a relationship or you have a family. Like, there's a level of loneliness as, you know, a unique human being with unique wants and needs. I think there's a lot of loneliness in us. And I think to have certain people in your life where you can confide in without judgment, this is the thing, because friends judge you as well. You say something and they're like, well, you can't do that. You're never going to be good at that. Or why are you bothering doing that? You know, friends are actually often the least helpful in life, but they're great to have around. Whereas, you know, psychologist helps you collect your thoughts, acknowledge things, puts a mirror up against you. She's very good of that. With me, you know, James, like, see what you're up to right now. This is not sustainable. And then I'm like, oh yeah, we've been here before. How do we work through it? So yeah, all those things are super beneficial.
There's one of the podcasts we did was with a woman who's a social media addiction expert, and I've actually seen there's this whole industry now called like digital wellness, which is pretty much about this. And obviously, I think probably one of the ways you and I know each other is through like the whole world of LinkedIn and social media, and that's, I'm sure, has been a big part of you growing your business, and it's also been a big part of me growing my business. But there's obviously a negative side to social media, which people are waking up to, and polarization. So how has that like interacted with your journey with mental health as well?
It's a good question. I definitely, I definitely have addictive behavior, and social media, in the main, LinkedIn, TikTok now, YouTube, and Instagram. Like, I'm just a revolving finger, you know, going round and round and round and round and round. And when I'm hyperactive, I'm more addicted to it. That's what happens. And I can be more intense in terms of like my obsession with it. My kids are on it all the time. It's a part of the world we live in now. It's part of, your life. I think you just got to be able to break and separate from it. But I also get so much value from it. Like, I must be on LinkedIn 5 hours a day.
5 hours?
Yeah.
Wow.
I'm on it all the time. Like, even when I'm in meetings, I'm on it. Like, it's always there for me. When I get home, I'm on it in the evenings. And the cool thing is, when you've got a global network, your feed never stops. This is a problem as well. Like,
yes.
Prime example, I was on it at 8:00 last night. I'm working on a project at the moment, and I was researching certain people in the US, and I'm discovering these amazing individuals that then I went and checked them out on on Instagram, and then I checked them on TikTok.
Yeah.
Like, the discoverability of it is phenomenal.
Yeah.
And the truth is, most people are watching TV and Netflix. So it's like, arguably they're all bad. It's a screen, isn't it?
Yeah.
So look, I think, each to your own. You can do what you like at the end of the day. I have one day a week, which is usually a Saturday, where I tend not to do anything with my phone.
Do you leave it in like another room, or how do you do that?
I'm not. Yeah. Actually, I guess I do. Yeah, I just don't touch it. Like, it doesn't come out with me. Like, if I'm with my kids, I don't need anyone to be anywhere else. Just with my children. So Saturday's usually the day, and that's like my break. Same with the laptop. The rest of the time, I'm usually on it. I watch a lot. I feel like I've watched everything on Netflix. So, like, I feel like and I don't watch like the standard terrestrial TV. So I feel like I'm watching that little screen of, shorts. But then I do feel like I learn so much.
Yeah.
I get so much interesting insight and tips and tricks and guidance. And there are amazing creators out there. That's why the creator economy is so big. You can be anyone, and you can start sharing. I mean, a prime example, I don't know why I'm bringing it up, but this morning I was watching how a scaffolder makes 6 figures. And I thought to myself, if you're in the industry and you're on the tools, this guy is giving you away all the stuff you need to learn.
Yeah.
And I thought, that's powerful. That's democratizing. That's the word. Like, people's access to knowledge.
Yeah.
And that's what I want to do for sales, actually. That's partly the reason. SaaS sales is not something that is being talked about on the uni campuses.
Yeah. It's
still, why don't you be a lawyer? Why don't you be a consultant? Why don't you be a doctor? Why don't you go and work for the NHS?
Yeah.
Why don't you do business? But what is business
when
you're 18 or 20 or 21 and you don't... But we all know now that you can just take that phone, that device, become a creator and be earning, multiple 6 figures, if not millions a year.
Yeah.
It doesn't require you to have any degree.
Yeah.
Who's the mug? Is it the person that's saying, oh, social media is too much for everyone? Or is it the person that's just like, don't give two hoots? it's a tool for me.
Yeah.
And I've got 35,000 connections on LinkedIn. That is not my friendship group. I connect and speak to hundreds. Like, my point is, it's a marketing channel. I think people get hung up a little bit about it. Like, I, for example, don't put my kids' photos on social media. Many people do.
Why is that? You want to protect them?
It's not a protection thing. I think it's just a bit naff. I just I don't need to parade my kids everywhere, and I get why people do it, and I like seeing other people's families evolve, but I don't need to, so I don't.
Yeah.
It's each to your own. Do what you want to do, what suits you. I don't think it's as bad as it makes. I think it was like the TikTok CEO doesn't let his kids on TikTok.
Not surprised by that.
Yeah, not surprised. Like, this is it. But then I also think, my children who are in like the between 9 and 12, they play a lot of Xbox. But then while they're playing Xbox, they have FaceTime on and they're talking with their friends and they're communicating.
Yeah.
They're not just locked away by themselves. So
it's a social thing.
It is a social thing, and so the benefits are great. And we're all tied to technology now, unless you're, a farmer or in hospitality or the many things you can do without a computer. But generally, the economy is made up of a digital economy in this day and age. So you might as well get used to it and figure it out. Like, it's like AI and ChatGPT. If you're not using that, again, people don't even know what that is still. It's mad. Yeah. But if we went downstairs and we started asking people what it is, most people would look at you like, I don't know what that is.
Yeah, or they've heard of it, but they've never even thought, how would I use this in my daily life? Yeah.
They've never even logged in.
Yeah.
Like I managed just for a syndicate to invest in OpenAI.
Yeah.
Right. And I'm like, this is super cool.
Yeah.
And the level of productivity and insights, and I'm even scratching the surface on it, but like the technology used in the right way is a beautiful thing. Yeah.
I think going to like learning things on social media, I think when I first started probably posting regularly on LinkedIn about 5 years ago, but before that I was more of a consumer, and I feel like I did used to learn a lot, but I feel like LinkedIn is going the same way as like Instagram, TikTok, all these things, where I feel a lot of the content is very superficial, but I think it's the nature of the platform, which is people don't really go on there consciously. They go and they start scrolling, they may stop. But I do, obviously I'm grateful because I wouldn't have started my business without LinkedIn. But for me, one of the reasons I started this podcast is I want to do more like long form content like we're doing here. Because I feel something like YouTube, I'll give you examples outside of sales, like my uncle learned how to grow vegetables in his garden, like on YouTube. You were mentioning the scaffolding thing. Even sometimes I'll get a builder over, they'll like look something up on YouTube. At the start, I was like, oh, does he not know what he's doing? And I realized all builders do this, right? And then there's, sales, all these other professions. So I feel like YouTube, because it's that like more long form content, I feel like that's where you can like really learn things on a deeper level.
Without a doubt, I think, from a learning platform perspective, YouTube is number one. Let's be honest, for me, Instagram's just soft porn. That is what it is. Like, it doesn't matter what it is. You're looking at images of either half-dressed women or men, shiny, sexy cars, or sexy exotic destinations that you can travel, or sexy food. Yeah, like that's soft
very
porn.
True, yeah.
Right now, LinkedIn is, and I worked there for almost 4 years. I loved it before I worked there. I loved it while I was there, and I still do have an affinity to it. But it's so noisy. Yeah. And so therefore clickbait is what gets people attention. And everyone's been told to be a thought leader and influencer, especially in sales. So you've got people with zero experience putting stuff up there. And that's annoyed me a little bit. It's like I used to have a bit of a moat around LinkedIn, as in, people couldn't really reach my reach on there, and that's just disappeared. Yeah. Because I could talk about cold calling, which is so naff and boring, right? But we still do it. And that same day, there'd be 1,000 other SDRs talking about cold calling. Yeah. Like, where's the edge? Yeah. So, I enjoy LinkedIn. I'm not a big Twitter, X or whatever it is these days. Like, I don't like it. I've never warmed to it. I don't digest it. I don't like the experience. I still prefer LinkedIn over any other experience app, and I get so much from it. But to your point, I think it's been, it's not what it was, and no one's really going to come along with a new professional network, because you're not going to go and update a new platform. It's so hard. They've been around for 20 years, and in my opinion, depending on what happens in the world, they'll be around for another 20 years. Because it's so integrated into the B2B world. So that's my thoughts.
100%. Well, I think we'll get off the topic, because we're going to sound like two old men complaining about LinkedIn and how it's had its heyday. But something I thought was quite interesting in a sales perspective is you mentioned your experience actually as like nearly becoming a professional rower and like representing Great Britain, which I didn't know of. But I'm not surprised, because I see a lot of top entrepreneurs, top salespeople are from like an athletics background, and I think it's like to do with the discipline that it takes. But I was wondering if you've like seen that in your career and like how that's helped you.
Without a doubt. As a high performing rowing athlete, I was training 6 days a week, sometimes twice, 3 times a day, in the gym for 7 a.m, out the gym by 8:30, back in at 1 p.m, back in again after school at 4 p.m. Like, that's routine, that's discipline, that's, whatever his name, Dave Goggins, that's you show up. You don't ask questions, you show up and you do it. And that's what I did for maybe 8 years. So for me to be told that I have to be on the phone for 4 hours, non-issue. I have a big bugbear these days with people not working late, like this whole work-life balance BS when you're starting out in your career. I think when you're in your 20s, you do what it takes to learn. You go into a WeWork these days, everyone's done by 4 o'clock.
And drinking the free pints.
Drinking the free pints.
WeWorks is finished now, but it was like
or
that,
we don't work, as I like to call it. Or it's now no longer. But it's just sad. It's just like I just don't get. It's just a willingness to work hard. Or has it ever been any different? Maybe not. Maybe there's always been a certain percentage of people that will outwork the population. I'm an outworker guy. I will outwork most people. That's not always been healthy. It's not always been good. There are people that will sit in this chair and say, look, I have a super balanced lifestyle and I've been successful. Well, good for them. That's just not how I've been wired. I'm trying to be absolutely smarter, but I still feel like I should outwork people. But I don't feel the need to sit in an office till 9 p.m. I used to do that. That used to be me. And I don't think you can't do that every week, night of the week. And that is not healthy. But sometimes a couple of days a week, you start at 7 or you start at whatever morning time and you go until it's done. Especially if you're an entrepreneur. It's what it takes. And I think it's funny, so many of these podcasts have very famous now, what I call kind of influencer entrepreneurs or entrepreneur gurus. It's easy when you got 10 million in the bank to say, work-life balance, that's what you should focus on. Well, thanks. You don't have to worry. I've still got to worry about providing for my 3 kids. I'm not there yet, nowhere near it, so I'm going to have to do the work. So partly why I also like documenting the journey. I think Gary V, the whole document your journey piece is really interesting because, and I love seeing his old videos. And even, I've discovered Mr. Beast through my kids, and it's Jimmy Donaldson, right? Is that his name, Jimmy?
I don't know, but I only recently discovered Mr. Beast.
Okay, you look at the guy and you think, you look back his videos 10 years ago, they're just hilarious. It took him 4 years to get 1,000 followers. 4 years.
Yeah.
He's now the most followed person on the planet on YouTube, 100 million plus followers. And I look at that like consistency over time. That's required effort. That requires work.
Yeah.
And I don't think that's going anywhere. Yeah, you can get lucky with Bitcoin. You could have got there 10 years ago and you could have ridden it out, or, you could get lucky with an opportunity, or you could have been the person that bought Uber shares, or been an angel investor in, I don't know what big tech companies have come out of England, but Revolut or something. But it's often not the case. You've still got to graft.
Yeah.
And I think, I'm not sure, because how instant and instantly gratifying social media is with soft porn, it's how people realise it is going to take you 10 plus years to go and achieve what you want to achieve.
Yeah.
And I can tell you from experience, you know, and we're going to look back on this, I thought I was going to be a millionaire by the time I was 30. I'm 37. I can tell you now I'm not yet a millionaire. I'll get there because I'm doing the work and I'm creating opportunities, and I have a network of people that are in that level. But it doesn't happen as quickly as you want it to happen.
Yeah.
And that's the reality.
I think, because this is one of the themes of the podcast, is like, you know, the spiritual material, and I feel like when you're younger as well, you often do that thing of focusing on, I want to be a millionaire, or when you start your business, I want to reach 1 million. But just that in itself is not going to get you, and it's more like, okay, how are you going to impact a lot of people? Because if you impact a load of people and you really help them, they're going to throw money at you because you can help them like solve a problem, right? So I think it's that millionaire piece. It's more like, okay, well, what's actually going to drive that behavior?
I agree. Like, I mean, one thought did come into mind: impact don't pay the bills.
But that's what I'm saying. It can pay the bills, though.
Yes,
yeah.
over time, it compounds. What I will say is, impact, network together compounds over time.
Yeah.
And the great thing about social media, generally, unless you really F up, is it only goes one direction. You know, it only goes up in terms of compounding followers and more awareness and more reach. And that's what I think is exciting about it.
Yeah.
And, you know, I've definitely not cracked it on the other platforms. And I look at these you know, creators or influencers on other platforms, and it amazes me how well they're doing, because you get more rewarded on YouTube, you know, TikTok, Instagram than you do on LinkedIn. Like I said, we've built these massive followings. We've built businesses off the back of it. That's all good. But we're not rewarding for getting another 10,000 followers on LinkedIn. In fact, the algorithm's hurting me now more than ever.
Yes. Yeah, agreed. Yeah, and I think it's crazy. We were
got back to LinkedIn now.
Yeah, well, we'll say one thing and then we'll go back off, because there was something I wanted to mention on your point. But yeah, with LinkedIn it seems, because now, I don't know if you've had this in the last couple of years, there's now interest in like B2B influencers, which is basically LinkedIn influencers, right? You had it for years with YouTube and Instagram and etc. And it's funny, I've been getting more people approach me than ever before around, oh, can we do a paid partnership and we'll sponsor a post, etc. But it's surprising because I'm like, well, you should have contacted me 3 years ago, because that's when I was really getting a load of views on my post. But it's funny, there's external companies, and LinkedIn could be doing this themselves. LinkedIn could be monetizing it themselves, but they're not. They don't really. It seems they don't really care about the creators. So.
They don't need to. It's so successful, LinkedIn as a business. You know, Microsoft absolutely got it for a steal. 26 billion it was bought for. You know, it's worth probably 4 times that now. Well, maybe not 4 times, but it's worth a huge amount. And it's, you know, you've got the amount of connections. You can imagine the amount of connections that are leading to business every single day on LinkedIn around the world, 24/7, 365. It's phenomenal. It must generate billions, if not trillions, of economic value, and that's its mission: is to create economic opportunity for every member of the global workplace. And they're only at 1 billion. You know, I think there's 3 billion people in work around the world in a 7 billion population. So only half the world's population are in some economic work, right? Think how much more growth there is to go in some of these places around the world. Like, do they really need to help you make an extra 100 quid on a post?
Yeah. That's fair. But I think, going to your point, to challenge that is, a lot of people use LinkedIn. Yes, there's the connection piece, right? Of, I'm going to make a connection. Maybe I can do business with that person. Maybe I can get a job with that person. But there are a lot of people that go on LinkedIn to learn, like you were talking about earlier. And surely the people that are posting content on there, like educating, giving free advice away, surely they should be incentivized. Like you said, that happens on YouTube as an example. Yeah,
it's true. But once you start, you can't stop, can you? As in, like, LinkedIn have nailed it so much, they've got away for it so long that you're not going to stop posting because they don't pay you. Whereas if they started paying you or some people, then that might shift and change the game for them too much.
Yeah.
So it's just
Yeah, and it could. I don't even think it's pay. It could be more
rewarded.
matching you with brands, isn't it? Like getting more involved in the process.
Yeah.
But yeah.
It's not. I don't see it happening.
Yeah. Something that's related to slightly getting away from LinkedIn, but slightly sticking with it is you were talking about impact don't pay the bills, and I think I agree to some extent, but I think it's all about what type of impact are you creating, because if it's such a huge impact that this person really needs your service, right? And the thing I was thinking about, because we're obviously in this world, and I know loads of people that are LinkedIn influencers and they've maybe got 1 million followers, but they're broke because either they don't know how to monetize the content that they're creating, or they're just like doing these kind of personal posts like you were saying with the kids or the family or whatever. And I think that's fine to show you're a human sometimes, but I always say when I'm training people how to use LinkedIn, like that should be maybe 5 to 10% of your posts, because people, if you want to monetize it, you've got to teach people about business, right? Because that's what LinkedIn's about at the end of the day. And on the other side of it, I've seen people that maybe have like 2,000 followers, but it's something extremely niche and it's very high ticket value, and they're like multimillionaires, right? So I think it's what I'm talking about is like, there's like, okay, I'm impacting people because they're seeing the post with my family and my kids, etc. It's not really like genuine, like real impact. Whereas there's other people that are reaching less, but it's like very deep, the connections and the impact they're having on those lives. So,
Yeah. So are you saying which one's better, or?
No, I think definitely I'd rather have 2,000 followers and be like a multi-millionaire, not just from the monetary perspective, but also because I've got like very deep connections with people versus I've got, millions of followers and like it's very loose, right? And that's also what I'm seeing now. I'm looking at like other channels like YouTube. I feel like having 30k followers on YouTube, maybe it's not, because everyone says this, that the price per view on LinkedIn is maybe the best because you've got CEOs of like, huge companies and stuff on there. But I also feel like people on YouTube who follow your content, they're actually like, whereas I feel like you're a bit more disposable on LinkedIn.
Well, I'll give you a great example of this, right? So I've got a list of the top 20 people in the world that I admire, and I've made it my task to meet them.
Okay, interesting.
And I've actually met 10 of them at the 20, so it's pretty good going, right? So there's people like Peter Jones from Dragon's Den, for example, Tony Robbins, Russell Bronson, ClickFunnels. I've met them.
Wow.
And one of that people is not quite on the list, but he's a very successful UK business influencer. I'll name check him. His name's James Sinclair. He's a serial entrepreneur, owns leisure parks, owns an ice cream brand, originally from Essex. I was at an event of his on Monday called Investorpreneur.
Yeah.
And when I sat down, I sat next to a guy from Austin, Texas. We're in the middle of Essex. And I'm like, what are you doing here? Do you live here? He's like, no, I literally flew over from this event. And I was like, sorry, like you flew over for this? He goes, yeah, man. I was like, okay, tell me how that happened. He goes, well, I was staying in Colorado at my parents' house. Bit bored, got onto YouTube, discovered James's YouTube channel, started watching his videos. Then I got retargeted with an ad, liked the sound of it, saw it was England, thought I'd make a trip, and here I am.
Wow.
That's the power of like long form content and being an expert in your field. And this is the thing about, you and I both know thousands of people on LinkedIn, especially in the sales industry, right? 0.001% of them, none of them basically are on YouTube making content.
Yeah.
And the other thing on YouTube, what YouTube does do, which I find frustrating, and I think TikTok's better at it, YouTube does push you to the 0.1 creators, percent creators. Like you're seeing them all the time. In my case, it's entrepreneurs, content, and hustle porn, and music, something I'm quite into as well. But like Grant Cardone is a great example, right? He is in my email. I don't even unsubscribe. I don't know why, but every channel I log into, I guarantee if I get off this call and I log into one of my social, he'd be the first thing I see. And I've actually warmed to him now. I quite like his content, and his Marmite character. But you've got to give him respect where respect is due. I think it's fantastic. He's got an amazing wife that really supports him and is super supportive. But the point I'm making here is like, it's very hard to crack these other channels, and there's a lot of young creators now that are cracking it just because they understand the thumbnail, the creator, they know how to write a script using ChatGPT. They can get a studio like this in their, you know, their best mate's wealthy garage, and they can set it up and they can edit it. They can do all this stuff that I just don't know how to do, or I have no interest in, and they can get 10,000 followers. But they're not offering the value you could offer, or what I could offer. That winds me up. That really winds me up, if I'm honest. I think, you know, I've done this in my career. I've achieved these earnings. I've done that in sales. I've done this, and yet no one will watch my YouTube channel. But then again, that's the game. You know, it's the game we're in. And you've got to learn to play it. And I'm not playing it on other channels right now. You know, TikTok, I post every single day. I did a studio session like this. Did 100 TikToks. They go out every day. You know, so I probably needed to do it. And I've got like 6,000 followers. And
nice.
But that's not you know, it's not 50,000. It's not.
Well, it's a process.
It is a process. Maybe I will. Maybe I won't. And maybe
watch your space. YouTube. James and I are going to be big on it.
Who cares? TikTok, we're coming to get you.
Well, yeah. Last question. I always close the show with this question: is what advice would you give to younger self? To make that more specific, I always give an instance that we've talked about on the show. And so let's just go back 4 years ago, just before the pandemic, when you had your last kind of incident. What would you say to James back then?
It will work out. It generally does work out. It never happens as fast as you want it to happen. So stop putting pressure on yourself to go faster. Like slowing down to speed up is the advice. And you know, I'm going through another kind of iteration of learnings right now, just in my business and my professional life, and I'm reminding myself now to slow down before I go fast again, because I'm 37, so you know, I'm not far off 40 now. I don't feel it, but I look at it and I'm thinking, you know, where do I want to be when I'm 40? Where do I want to be when I'm 45? Because my kids will be, you know, late teenagers. And I think I'll still, that advice of like just slow down to speed up, especially if you're someone that moves fast. Like me. So slow down to speed up. That's my advice.
I think that's especially good advice to a lot of salespeople and entrepreneurs that struggle with. I've definitely got that lack of patience sometimes. You want it now. Of
course you do.
Well, it's been an epic show. I've really appreciated you coming. I love these conversations because people like you that obviously I know outside of this environment, but hearing, you know, another side of you. So it's been really great, James.
Thanks for having me. Great questions. Yeah, you're right. Good setup. Nice. Made me feel very nice and comfortable. So good fun. Well done.
Awesome. Thanks a lot.
Cheers, mate. Well done.
Cheers. Subscribe to us across all the podcast platforms and on YouTube. And we'll see you on the next episode of The Cosmic Bridge.